If you're a finger drummer, you might be making one of these crucial mistakes. It's okay, they're super common and they're super easy to fix, but they're also very important to talk about so you don't mess up your progress. So let's dive in. So first of all, my name is Dragon. I'm a finger drumming instructor. I've been playing finger drums for over 10 years now, and my mission is to help teach you how to play finger drums like a real drummer. If you want to learn the secrets of realistic finger drumming on the pads, make sure you check out my free finger drumming starter course. There's a link to that in the video description or in the pinned comment down below. So first of all, in my eyes, finger drumming is a legit way to play drums, to be a drummer. It's a real musical instrument and it needs to be treated as such. So a lot of people look at finger drumming and they see it as like a toy or like just pushing buttons, but it's actually a real musical instrument. You can play it with the same degree of skill and complexity that you could play any other musical instrument. And so it's important to have standards for learning finger drumming, for understanding the best and the most efficient ways to actually play the instrument. So the first major mistake that finger drummers make is having the wrong pad layout. Now, there are obviously tons of different ways to set up your pads for finger drumming, so it's not like only one of them is the correct way, but there are definitely some layouts that are not optimal. And it all depends really on what your goals are, what your intention is. A lot of people lay out their pads for sample chopping style of finger drumming, and that works fine in most cases. But when it comes to playing the drums on the pads like I teach, there's a lot of pad layouts that don't work very well. You know, you want a pad layout that actually optimizes the setup of the drums and makes them easier to play so you can do more things, play more drums and more styles of drumming in one setup. So for example, like a drum kit, if you can imagine an acoustic drum kit, they're always kind of set up in the same way, right? Drummers are not moving around their drums or reorganizing them. Like if you want to play metal, you don't set up your drums in a different position than if you want to play jazz or something, right? And so for finger drumming, it's also really important to have a standardized layout that really works for the principles of drumming, which basically are hand and in our case, finger isolation. You want to be able to play drums on the pads. You want to be able to isolate your hands and your fingers to do different things at the same time. That's kind of like the core principle of drumming. And so you want a pad layout that works very well for that, to isolate your hands. That's the essential principle. So for example, one really popular layout is the mirror layout. You might have seen this if you've seen other popular finger drummers. Not everyone uses it, but a lot of people do, where they'll kind of set up the pads in a half and half split, and their hands will be alternating in order to hit all of the drum hits in their drum groove. That is not as effective for realistic drumming because a drummer doesn't do that on a drum kit. They're not alternating their hands for everything. They're isolating their hands. So one hand is playing one rhythm and the other hand is playing a different rhythm, but they're coming together and playing at the same time to create what's called a compound rhythm, a drum beat, you know? And so they're not trying to hit all the different parts just by alternating their hands. So if you watch people play the mirror layout, you'll kind of understand, you'll see what they're doing, and you might think that it makes sense. But then if you go watch a drummer play a drum kit, you'll see, oh, they're not actually doing that at all. They're isolating their limbs to play different parts together. And that's key. So the mirror layout is not the best option for realistic drum kit style finger drumming like I teach. So if you're wondering what is the best pad layout for realistic hand isolation drum kit style finger drumming, I have a full pad layout breakdown and setup in my free starter course, which I mentioned at the beginning of this video. I'd highly recommend, if you want to learn realistic finger drumming, going and just getting that. It's free. You just put in your email and you'll get free access to the course. It has a bunch of different lesson videos. I think it's like an hour and a half of lessons total, but it includes, like a full pad layout setup walkthrough, free drum emulator walkthrough, so you get like the best, most realistic drum kit samples. And there's also introductory lessons on actually starting to play drum grooves with your hands and your fingers in this style. So the second most common finger drumming mistake is changing your pad layout too often. So this kind of builds on the previous point, which is, having the wrong pad layout to begin with. But in addition to having a pad layout, even if a finger drummer does have a layout that works pretty well, a lot of times they'll switch it up a lot, or they'll just try a little too much experimentation in the beginning when they're still learning. And this is a crucial mistake because when you're learning a new instrument, no matter what it is, you want to have a basic standard in place so that you can develop muscle memory. So think of it like if you're learning guitar. Now, a guitar has standard tuning, right? The 6 strings on a guitar are standardized normally to one preset tuning. And of course, you could tune those strings to anything you want. There are all sorts of different tunings that you can have on a guitar. But if you're just starting out to learn, it's a really good idea to keep it in standard tuning. And finger drumming is no exception. You want to have that nice standardized pad layout that gives you the most options possible, which is the hand isolation layout that I teach. And then from there, you don't want to worry about switching it up too much. Super important to just get a solid pad layout that works at the beginning and then stick to it at least for a good while before you experiment and explore other layouts. The third super common mistake that I see is using fixed velocity sensitivity. Fixed velocity is basically where, these pad controllers that we have, when we hit them, we're hitting with a certain amount of force. And these pads are designed, almost all of them are designed to register how hard we're hitting the pad, how much pressure we're putting. And so if you're on like a drum kit, and if I hit the drum really hard, it's gonna make a loud sound. And if I hit the drum very soft, it's gonna make a quiet sound, right? Now, they've emulated this with these electronic pad controllers. So if you hit a pad really hard, the computer will give you a loud output. And if you hit the pad really soft, the computer will give you a quiet output. This is really good because it's mimicking what actually happens in an acoustic sense when you hit something. And the electronic term for this is called velocity, the amount of power that you're putting into your hit. So fixed velocity sensitivity is when you put in a setting in the computer or on the pad controller that tells it, no matter how hard I hit, just give me the same level output every time. So normally people just crank this to a high setting. So even if I'm hitting softly, it's gonna give me a loud full output, full volume. If you start playing and learning how to play finger drums and you have your velocity sensitivity fixed at maximum, then you're basically training your muscles to ignore their power because your ears are going to be hearing a full volume output no matter how hard you hit. So you'll be sort of subconsciously training your muscles to not pay attention to how hard they're hitting, right? So your range of hits, your power is going to be all over the place. You will have no control over what's called your dynamics, your hardness or your softness of your hits. And again, at the beginning, it's not super important to worry about dynamics. But if you're training your ear and your muscles connected to not have any awareness of them at all, then in the future, when you do want to learn dynamics, you will have trained yourself into a bad place, into a place of like, oh, I didn't realize my muscles are this off. If you turn off that velocity sensitivity later because you want to start playing ghost notes, for example, then you might find like, oh man, my dynamics are all over the place and I have no control because I trained myself to just not have any control because I just had it on max volume the whole time. So that's a really big one, by the way. I see a lot of people doing that, having just maximum velocity fixed. And it's just, I think it's a really bad habit because it trains your fingers to just not even pay attention to what they're doing. So the fourth biggest mistake that I see a lot of finger drummers make is inconsistent fingering. So what is fingering? Well, fingering is basically the placement or positioning of your fingers on your pads when they're resting. So sort of if you imagine like a typing at a computer keyboard, your fingers rest on that like home position, right? Your fingers are always rested on those certain keys in the middle row. And from that home position, you can easily reach all the other keys. Your thumbs can tap the space bar, etc. It's pretty easy to type all the words that you can type with your fingers resting in that home position. So that is a fingering position. And on finger drums, it's the same way. So you have your pad layout, which is set up to easily play drums. And then on that pad layout, you rest your fingers in a certain home position. In my system of teaching, there are 3 home positions. These home positions are really important because, again, same with having a standard pad layout, they give you this sort of standardized central position from where you can play drums much more effectively. So just like the computer keyboard, if your fingers are resting on that natural home position, it's really easy. It's a lot easier to just type all your words. And so fingering positions on the pads are the same way. So this also kind of goes hand in hand with finger drummers who change their pad layout. When you change your pad layout, you also end up kind of changing your home fingering position. Some finger drummers will have certain fingers resting on certain pads at one point, and then when they add a different sound or they change a sound around, they'll kind of switch which fingers they're using. And again, this inhibits the development of your muscle memory, because you want your muscles to be resting in the same place, hitting the same pads for a long time as you're learning, so that you can really develop your skills in each of your fingers. So this is a super important one, and fingering positions are not something that I've seen any other finger drummer cover or talk about really. So if you want to learn all 3 of my primary fingering positions and how to use them on the finger drums, that's taught in my finger drumming foundation course. So I'd recommend starting with the free starter course, because that's covers all your setup and everything that you'll need to start playing finger drums. And you don't need to worry about fingering positions at the very beginning. But then if you want to keep building your skills and get a complete finger drumming skill set, all of that stuff is covered in my foundation course. So that's basically a deep dive into realistic finger drumming for anyone who is brand new or has a little bit of finger drumming experience. It's basically my ultimate all-in-one course. So again, start with the free starter course, but then if you want to continue and really develop a full set of finger drumming skills, I would highly recommend checking out the foundation course, and I'll link that down in the description as well, so you can check that out. Okay, so the 5th and final mistake that I see a lot of finger drummers making is trying to learn too many things at once. And this happens to almost everybody who learns a musical instrument, actually. They get really excited because usually we get inspired by musicians that we see online or in concert or whatever, and we're like, oh, I want to do that, and that's awesome. That's a great reason to learn an instrument. But then we kind of try to jump in and learn too many things at once. So at the beginning, you just want to learn simple, straightforward, foundational stuff. And you want to keep the whole process fun. Also, you don't want to overwhelm yourself with a bunch of complex techniques or music theory and all that stuff. All of that makes it very easy to get discouraged or sidetracked or just to give up on music entirely. Start with the basics and just do them one at a time. Learning drumming is like playing with building blocks. You start with one simple building block, and then you get another one and you stack it on top. And the more you can do like that, you'll build a really strong foundation, a base for yourself, to where then learning advanced techniques is a lot easier because you already have a stable foundation. And going back to the course I mentioned earlier, my foundation course, that's literally what it does. That's the whole purpose of that course, is it gives you all of the essential principles and building blocks of finger drumming in the right order, so that you don't have anything to worry about. Basically, you're not overwhelmed or confused about what to learn next. It just lays it all out for you step by step. You start with hand isolation, playing the basic principles of all drum grooves, and then you extend that a little bit with finger isolation. You start with just your index fingers, and then you add your middle fingers, just taking it one little step at a time. And then once you have your middle fingers, playing basic drum grooves, making them a little bit more complex, just one little piece at a time, and then adding drum fills. It's a very step-by-step process, and that actually just makes it faster and easier when you do it that way, instead of just learning something here or something there or watching a bunch of random tutorials from different people who teach differently. It's important to just pick one thing, one path, like a proven path that people have used to learn, and just go with it for a little while. And then once you have that foundation, no matter who you learn it from, then it's a lot easier to branch out and learn more stuff. So those are the 5 mistakes that I see a lot of finger drummers making. Obviously, they're all super easy to correct. It's not a big deal if you're making these mistakes, but if you correct them now, then your progress will be faster and you won't have to come back and undo anything in the future. Learning good habits now and understanding why to do each of these things will just help you so much more in the future. So I hope this video helped. Leave a comment if you think of any other mistakes that finger drummers make that you see. I could probably think of a couple more beyond just these 5, but these are the ones that really stand out to me. But if you think of anything else, definitely leave it in the comment so that other people can see. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.